When tech enters education, learning goes down.
Oh, it is a bold statement, a now viral stand against tech in the classroom. That's former educator turned neuroscientist Dr. Cooney Horvath, who went viral in this video in front of a Senate committee talking about the digital delusion schools across America, across the globe, are experiencing.
Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention to memory to literacy to numeracy to executive functioning to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did.
Test scores, they've gone down. So why? What's happening? Well, Dr. Horvath thinks he knows the reason, and it has everything to do with that iPad, that Chromebook, that lean into digital learning.
Look at the data. Once countries adopt digital technology widely in schools, performance goes down significantly.
It's not working, but we can turn it around. And the largest school districts in the world are listening to his research, and they're making massive changes. You can get behind it too. I talked to Dr. Horvath, a conversation here on Momcast that you cannot afford to miss. I'm Emma Jade. Welcome to Momcast. I was scrolling Instagram and I, like all the millions of other people, saw your testimony. Millions and millions of people have seen it. What did you say that really hit home for parents, for educators? Why did this go viral?
I think I put words to what people have been feeling for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to talk with anyone without them acknowledging that something feels off, something feels different and wrong, whether that's with our kids, with our school, with our society. And I think it's reassuring for someone to come along and say, yeah, you're not wrong. There is something off right now. And we can draw a pretty strong correlation between that problem and what's happening in schools. And the good news is it's fixable. So I think on one hand, it validated people's feelings. And on the other hand, it kind of pointed towards a reason, which gives us hopefully hope to go forward.
You know, what's really interesting is coming from you were an educator first, and then you turned into the research and becoming a neuroscientist. Tell me the correlation that you're seeing with edtech and test scores and success for our children in school right now.
Yeah, it's not good. We've seen, so when it comes to test scores internationally, those really started to drop pretty significantly around 2010. And then in-class behaviors really started to change around 2015, 2016. That's when if you were working in a classroom, you couldn't not notice that kids couldn't do today what they could do 10 years ago. When I was teaching, it was different. They had different arguments. They had different beliefs. They were a little bit further along than we are today. And we've fought to try and figure out what the heck is going on. And a lot of people started to blame teachers. They started to blame the curriculum. They started to blame the structure of school. But realistically, none of that stuff had changed all that significantly, especially not in a 5-year window to make all these big differences. What really changed was the amount of tech we were putting in the classrooms. We were relying on the tech to do homework. We started relying on tech to give grades, to train kids on math. And that seemed to be the biggest trigger of, wait, we don't learn that way. We don't learn from tech. We learn from other humans. So exactly is in any state that you look at, in any country you look at, the more tech goes up, the more learning goes down. And as you start to reverse the tech, learning starts to go back up. So it's a pretty coherent relationship between the two.
You know, it's so interesting because I feel like some people will have the argument of, oh, we're just not using it correctly, or tech is here, so we have to integrate it. What if my child doesn't know how to use a smartphone? God forbid, because all of his friends are on smartphones. But you are fighting that exact argument. How? What are you saying there?
It's the two things to think about is, yes, tech is here. So is heroin. I don't think any of us believe we need to throw that in our school. Just because something exists, it doesn't mean that it needs to exist within our school. And so you can make the argument that, look, because tech is prevalent, we need to teach kids about technology. And that's fine. That becomes a curricular argument. We need to teach about something. And we did that growing up. When I was in school, we had a computer lab. They taught me about typing. They taught me how to use Excel. Cool. Somehow, through some linguistic alchemy, though, the idea that we need to teach about a tool has morphed into we need to teach all skills through a tool.
Yes.
Rather than saying we need to teach about tech, we're saying we need to teach math through tech and English through tech. And that's a very different argument. That's a pedagogical argument. And the response is no, you need to teach each concept or each content in the way best suited to that content. So when you teach math, learning that through a computer is much worse than learning that with other human beings. So you can still say, and I'm completely behind it, we need to teach kids about computers. Cool, I got no problem with that. We have a computer lab, go to town. It does not follow that every kid needs a laptop at all times in every class as they walk through the school. That's where the problem came in, and that's where we got to start. That's why I say when people say, do you think you should ban tech? No, I think we're going to need tech at some. If you want to teach a kid about AI, you're going to need tech to use AI. I just think you're going to see schools pulling back from every kid has a computer at all times to we have a computer cart and you check the computer out when you need to learn about it.
You know, it's really easy to get behind the argument of we don't need tech in schools. Okay, great. But there is specific research that you have done. There's science that really backs this up on a successful way of learning something. And it's human to human, something that we have been doing correctly. And you brought this up in another interview that you did that I saw recently, was it's how we've been doing or how we've been teaching has been working. I mean, schools have not changed in the last, 50 years. It's stayed the same. Tech has been introduced, and as a result, we have seen lower test scores. We have seen students not being as successful as previous generations. So tell me a little bit specifically about that research. Why human to human learning is so helpful, so prominent.
So there's a lot of mechanisms of learning that tech goes against.
And here's an interesting fact for you. The subjects affected the most by too much tech, math and science. We're going to talk about why that is. That's next on Momcast.
Momcast is sponsored by Moxie Pest Control, protecting what matters most.
Why human to human learning is so helpful.
So there's a lot of mechanisms of learning that tech goes against. The issues of attention, issues of memory, but one of the biggest issues is what we call empathetic response. So human beings have evolved for 150,000 years, specific biological mechanisms to learn from other human beings. We have what's called a mimicry system. For a long time, they were called mirror neurons. So if you've ever heard that term, basically what it's saying is one of the things that makes humans so dang special is by watching another human being, I can mimic all of their behaviors and thoughts, and in so doing can learn without ever having to do anything. That mechanism, which we now call affective empathy, is a massive driver of learning. If I can tell the resonance between two pairs of biology, I can tell you how well that person is going to learn, how well feedback is going to hit, how well they're going to together collaborate on a project. It's just human. And it makes perfect sense. That's biology. We never had tech before, so biology came up with its own ways to learn. When we use tech, you cannot get that resonance. That resonance requires interaction between people. When you move something online, you lose a lot of that resonance. When you do math here instead of with a person, you have no chance of getting that resonance. So a huge aspect of human learning just disappears. And when people say, well, something like AI can mimic being a human being, it can mimic it just fine. But the driver of the learning is that biological resonance. When my brain and your brain sync together, that is when learning goes up. So if the best AI in the world can mimic you, the one thing that AI can't do is have a brain, which means I can never lock in with that AI's brain because it doesn't exist. So no matter how much it mimics you, I can never get that biological response that will in turn drive learning. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, but human beings have developed a power to learn from other human beings. That's what makes us special. And if we want to circumvent that process, you're just going to make learning a little bit worse, a little bit lesser, a little bit more shallow, unfortunately.
I don't know why, but that like made me feel like a little emotional because it's so beautiful the way that it really purely is about connection. And
Yeah.
that's how we learn. And that's how we grow in life. Why? Why did we let tech take that away?
See, it was so fun and flashy and sexy. Tech is really good at playing our attention. The one thing that is difficult for human beings, and it's an energetic. I won't explain the mechanism because it gets really boring fast. Sustained attention is something that we work at. It's difficult for humans to do.
Yeah.
We're built for really short blasts. Um, Tech comes in and says, "Cool, don't worry about sustained attention. We're going to give you the short blast." And in so doing, it holds us. That's the attention economy. We can spend hours on that, whereas it's much harder to spend 30 minutes talking with a person. But what you get from those hours on a screen are very qualitatively and quantitatively different than the 30 minutes you can get with a person. And one is by and away far better for development, for well-being, for knowledge, for acquisition, and it's the human stuff. I think we're building a culture, a society where we're trying our damnedest to be hyper individual and alone and not have to have a community. I can do things alone. And I get it. That's fine. But what that's doing to the next generation is it's scary. It's not helping them learn. It's not helping them thrive. That's why depression is going through the roof. That's why knowledge and skills are going down. It's scary, but it sucks. Being around other people is not easy, but it's what we do. It's what we have to do. It's what we're built to do. And when we lean into that, everything gets a little bit better.
You know, it's almost a little hard to hear, you know, as a parent. I've got 4 kids of my own. They're all really young and, you know, they have iPads and they get to play on their iPads. And I wonder if I failed them in a way because of that. You know, because I
No,
can see, but you know, there's a vast difference between how my child acts after the iPad and how he acts on a day when he doesn't have it.
We're the same. So I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and there was times where she is allowed to watch TV in the morning just because my wife and I both have to work some mornings. Oh, those days are nightmares.
They're
I
nightmares.
hate that day. But you can't blame yourself. As parent, there was a day, and I just got back from Italy, so it's not even a day. It still happens there. The saying of "takes a village to raise a kid" is very true.
Yeah.
We always had support. We always had help. Was if I needed to work in the morning, my mother could come over and help. My daughter could go to my next door neighbor and hang out with them. The old lady upstairs would take care of her. Everyone was pitching in. But now I live in a city where no one else in my family lives. I don't know my neighbors. I don't have an upstairs. So what do? We have to have another way to help us raise our kids. Tech kind of swings in there and helps. So we can't blame ourselves as parents. We're doing the best we can, but I think if we can recognize it, then we try our best just to minimize that as much as possible and go back to connecting. It's funny when Australia recently banned social media for kids under 16, we were expecting a lot of pushback from kids. Didn't get it. Kids really didn't care. Schools didn't care. Teachers didn't care. Who seemed to care the most was the parents. And the reason for it was now they had to do stuff with their kids and they just didn't quite know what to do. It's like, well, what am I supposed to? If you remove something, you have to fill that with something else. And filling it with something else requires you to give your time and your focus and your energy back to them. Yeah. And in a world where everything is trying to take your time and focus and energy, it's real tricky to do. Gosh, sometimes they need an iPad. It's just the way the world works right now.
I want to talk to you about the Digital Delusion, which after your video in the Senate went viral, I know that, you know, that book was flying off the shelves. People were ordering it left and right. I know I saw one situation where a mom handed it out to everyone at the school board meeting. Tell me about, I mean, the title itself is very bold, The Digital Delusion. What's happening?
This lays out the case against ed tech in school.
Dr. Horvath has the actions that you can take today, the conversation that you can start right now. That's next on Momcast.
Momcast is sponsored by Moxie Pest Control, protecting what matters most.
Screens are not working in schools because we did so much great work on getting smartphones out of schools.
Right.
And rightly so. But I think people miss the big point that a smartphone is a screen. Just because you now give a kid a laptop where the screen is slightly larger and you've stamped your school's name on it, that doesn't make it any different. It's the exact same tool, just slightly larger. So whereas the phone was a good start, we now need to really think about all the rest of the tech they're going into. And I think, as I said, I think parents, teachers have known this forever, but teachers just don't have a voice. If you've been a teacher longer than 15 years, you know tech is bad. They're the ones who are like, ugh. But teachers, they can't say anything, otherwise they lose their jobs. So they just put up with it. It was the parents who knew something was going on. They're the ones with the loudest voices, but they didn't know enough about education, rightly so, they're not teachers, to know what the argument is. They had a feeling, but they didn't know what was going on. So my goal with this book was to say, here it is. Here's the argument. Here's the data. Here's the counter arguments you're going to face. Here is how you make this argument to your school to say enough is enough. And I think that's where the reason why it is so popular isn't because I've said anything unique. It's because I've said the one thing people they wanted to hear. They're like, thank you. You put that into words. That's what I need to say at the next board meeting. So that's why it's been working out.
I think a lot of parents and even teachers that I've spoken to have blamed a lot of this on COVID, have blamed a lot of it on, being out of school. But really, it does go back to tech. There's something, quite a few passages from your book that really stuck out to me. EdTech isn't failing because of outdated software or poor teacher training. It's failing because it's fundamentally incompatible with how human beings actually learn. Okay. Case in point, that's it. Really.
Full stop.
Stop.
I wish it didn't. I by all means, I am not anti-tech. I'm just very much pro-learning. If tech was somehow developed in a way that boosted learning and it went with the grain of human development, I'd be the first to say, bring in more tech. It's just so against the grain of how kids develop into adults that you can't get behind it. If your goal is learning, there are so many better ways to do it. If you read a hard copy book versus a screen, you will learn more by doing nothing different, just by having paper versus a screen. If you take notes or write by hand versus typing, you learn more, comprehend more, remember better. These are all acknowledgement that human learning, human development is biological. And the more you use your biology as part of that learning and integrate and interact with the world, the more your learning goes up. You can't do it virtually the same way you can do it analog.
And what's interesting is that this isn't just an argument that is, just words. You really have done the research here. You're a neuroscientist after all.
Well, that's the joy of being a neuroscientist. It took me, I've been doing it for 15 years. So it takes a while to wrap your head around it all, but it's all there. I think one of the coolest things to think about is most people think we are a brain just hitching a ride inside of, right? You're just a brain inside of a meat computer, yay, having a good time, or a meat robot walking around. People don't realize that, no, you are your body. You are not living in a body. You are as much your fingertips and your heart and your lungs and your spleen as you are your brain. All of this is part of cognition. So we make this mistake that if I'm online thinking about something, that's exactly the same as being in the real world thinking about that thing. And it's just not. The smells, the textures, the tastes, the surrounds, all of this is part of how you think, how you learn, how you develop. And when we use a very small screen with an unchanging location, all of this goes away.
So what do I do? If I'm a parent who I know that they have Chromebooks when my kid gets into junior high, or if I know that they issue, I actually couldn't even tell you how much time my child spends on their Chromebook because it's not really set out by the teacher. They don't really tell you. What can I do with starting the new school year so that I can take that away? And maybe I'm a little nervous to do that because I don't want to be not punished in a way, or my child punished or treated differently, but I don't want them to be using tech.
No, and it's okay to find your voice in this case. There's some states are now, like Delaware put forward a bill that would allow opt out, where as a parent you're free to say no tech, and my kid cannot have a penalty because we're not doing tech. He has to get the
Right.
same education. But that's not in every state. So what you do is always approach from a lens of curiosity and exploration. Teachers are your best friends. Teachers are not your enemies. If you wanted to pick an enemy in this, it's big tech. Go yell at them. So don't go to your teacher and be like, no, just say, hey, look, I've been learning more about tech. I've been learning more about learning. And I would like to, as much as possible, see if we can diminish tech in my son's life or my daughter's life. Maybe just start with, can we track? Can you tell me how much per week kids use tech in your classroom? And most teachers will say, no, I don't know. And we'll say, cool, for the next week, can we just track that together? Maybe every day I'll just send you an email and you tell me what you think. Do a little bit of work with the teachers, and then that'll give you the kind of angle to now say, can we pull it back here? Can we pull it back here? By all means, the tech never needs to exist in your house. The first thing I always tell parents is buy a printer. Your house is your house. And if people say you got to do homework online, cool, print it out. Oh, you got to submit your homework online. No, you don't. Hand a teacher a piece of paper and say, sorry, my parents didn't let me submit it online. No teacher in the world is going to say, fail. They're going to say, okay, gotcha. You're all good with that. If you get to talk to a board, here's what you say to a board. If you are going to force my kid to use tech, there's just 3 things I need from you. 1, where's the data that tech is effective? Because by all means, if you're spending $1 million on something, it works, right? They will never have that data because it doesn't exist. 2, is it safe? Where's the evidence that you have the safeguards in place that it cannot take his or her data? And then I would say the third thing is why? Can they explain why it's better than analog methods or what they're doing now?
For all of us parents, we think it's too big to fight. We're going up against billion-dollar companies. We're so frustrated with how addictive some of these platforms are for our kids, but then we're also tired, and we're up against an economy where 2 parents are working, or, whatever it is. The work that you're doing is so vital to my children, to children all across the world. I'm begging you to keep going. Begging.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's if I can just make your lives a little bit easier by saying, you don't need to do the research. I've done it for you. Here, just hand this in, then I've done my job. That makes me so happy.
Thanks for watching this episode of Momcast. I'm Emma Jade. I'll see you next week.
Momcast is sponsored by Moxie Pest Control, protecting what matters most.